The air in the briny Finch was thick. You could taste the salt from the Gulf, even 5 stories up, mixed with the expensive perfume of the women and the sharp, metallic tang of money, old money, new money, desperate money. It was Port Commerce Week in Harbor Key, and the whole city was hustling. My name is Morgan Allen, I'm 24, and my life is a balancing act. By day, I'm a part-time nursing student, trying to memorize anatomy charts that look like abstract art. By night, I'm here, balancing trays of champagne and seared scallops, wearing uniform shoes that felt fine at 5 p.m. but felt like glass-filled concrete by 11. My pen was clipped to my order pad, the cheap plastic digging into my wrist every time I reached to clear a plate. Most of the supper club was loud, tables of men in shiny suits, laughing too hard, their voices booming over the quiet jazz trio in the corner. They were celebrating the port, celebrating themselves. And then there was Table 9. Table 9 was silent, just one man, sitting alone, facing the room. He wasn't watching the band or the view. He was watching the room. The reservation identified him as Dimitar Vitoni. He wore a dark suit, but the fabric was matte, like it absorbed the light. He nursed a single, dark liquor, and his stillness was louder than all the laughter at the other tables. He had the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. It just takes up space. I was busy, trying to keep track of 3 tables at once, when the snap of fingers cut through the air. Cade Ramsey. If Dimitar Vitoni was a black hole, Cade Ramsey was a firework, all noise and blinding light. He was the king of Harbor Key nightlife, the guy who promoted the port, which really meant he owned every velvet rope, every bouncer, and, some said, every politician on the Suncoast. His table was a wreck of half-empty bottles, and his guests were loud and sloppy. "Hey, you!" he snapped, his voice a slick baritone. "More vodka for the lady." I turned. The lady he was pointing to, a young woman in a sequin dress, was slumped in her chair. Her eyes were unfocused, rolling slightly, and she was listing to the left. When I'd checked on them 20 minutes ago, she was fine. Now, she was gone. I plastered on my service smile, the one that felt like pulling tape off my skin. "Sir, I'd be happy to get her a club soda, or perhaps some coffee. She looks like she's had quite a bit already." Ramsey's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went flat. "Did I ask for your opinion? I asked for vodka." "She's celebrating. Pour the damn drink." This was the part of the job I hated, the part where I had to choose between a tip and my conscience. "Sir, it's against house policy and Florida state law to serve a guest who is visibly intoxicated. I can't." The fake smile vanished. His face, usually so charismatic for the cameras, twisted into something ugly. "House policy. You're a waitress. Your job is to pour. Don't be a useless piece of trash." My blood went hot, then cold. Trash. The word hit me like a physical blow. I've been called worse, but never by someone who smiled while they said it. Before I could find my voice, a shadow fell over me. It was Jules Pike, my shift manager, Jules, who always smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and desperation, his eyes darting around, always looking for who was in charge. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Ramsey?" Jules asked, ignoring me completely. "This waitress," Ramsey sneered, dragging the word out, "is refusing to serve my guest. She's quoting policy at me." Jules shot me a look of pure panic, the don't make waves look. "Morgan, mister. Ramsey is a key partner of the Port Commerce Alliance. He's a friend of the briny Finch. Just accommodate the guest, please." I couldn't. I glanced at the girl in the chair. In nursing school, they teach you to see signs. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. She wasn't celebrating. She was in danger. "Jules, I can't," I said, my voice low but firm. "Look at her. She's past her limit. It's not safe." "Don't be difficult, Alan," Jules hissed. His hand shot out and clamped around my upper arm. It wasn't a nudge. It was a grip, his fingers digging in like talons, yanking me off balance and pulling me toward the bar. "We don't need this hassle. Not this week. You'll do what the guest pays for." The pain was sharp, but the humiliation was worse. He was manhandling me in the middle of the dining room. I tried to pull free, but his grip tightened, his fingernails biting into my skin. "Let go of her." The voice wasn't loud. It was deep, calm, and carried the chill of steel. It sliced through the music, the chatter, everything. Jules froze. His hand was still locked on my arm, but his head snapped toward the voice. The man from Table 9 was on his feet. Dimitar Vitoni. He hadn't moved fast, but he was standing there as if he'd been there all along. "I'm sorry," Jules stammered, his eyes wide. "I said," Vitoni repeated, his gaze not on Jules's face, but on the white-knuckled hand crushing my arm. "Take your hands off my employee." Jules released me so fast I stumbled back. I automatically rubbed the spot, the skin already burning. Cade Ramsey let out an ugly, barking laugh. "His employee. Don't tell me you own this dump. Who the hell are you? Her white knight. Sit down, buddy. We're busy, and this piece of rubbish isn't worth the trouble." Rubbish. There was that word again. The whole room had gone quiet. The only sound was the clinking of ice as the bartender paused, mid-shake. Mr. Vitoni didn't even look at Ramsey. His dark eyes met mine. They were assessing, clinical, like a doctor looking at a chart. Then he turned his gaze to Jules, who looked like he was about to be sick. "My name is Dimitar Vitoni," he said, his voice still quiet, but it filled the sudden silence. "My private fund, Vitoni Beacon, holds the controlling interest in the briny Finch. This is my establishment. That," he nodded briefly at Ramsey, "is my guest, who is threatening my staff, and you," his eyes locked on Jules, "are putting your hands on them." Jules turned a shade of white I'd only ever seen on anatomy charts. "And you," Vitoni's gaze finally settled on Cade Ramsey, "will apologize to Miss Allen now." Ramsey's smirk twitched. He was cornered, and he hated it. Apologize to her. He laughed again, but it was brittle. "I don't think so. You might own the building, but I own the nightlife in this town. You know how hard it is to keep that late-night license you guys just got, the SLB, the Suncoast Licensing Board. They keep very close track of problem venues. It'd be a shame if the briny Finch became a problem." It was a threat, a blatant, public threat. He was saying he had the SLB in his pocket. He was saying he could shut us down, in front of everyone. He was declaring he was the real boss of Harbor Key. I stopped breathing. I was trapped between two giants, and I was just the gravel under their feet. My arm throbbed. I instinctively reached up and touched the cheap, plastic medic alert bracelet I've worn since I was a kid, a nervous habit. Vitoni's eyes flicked down. He saw the bracelet, and then he saw, just above it, the 4 angry red welts from Jules's fingers, already blooming on my skin. The air in the room didn't just get cold. It froze. The expression on Vitoni's face wasn't anger. It was something else, something final. It was the look of a man who had just made a decision. He looked past us to the head bartender. "Jules." "Mr. Vitoni, sir, I didn't realize," Jules babbled. "Kill the music," Vitoni commanded. "Sir." "Turn the house music off and turn the house lights up. Full." Jules, desperate to obey, scrambled to the control panel. The soft, ambient jazz cut off abruptly. A second later, the warm, intimate amber lighting snapped off, replaced by harsh, fluorescent white light. It was the kind of light they use for cleaning. Everyone squinted, their expensive dinners suddenly looking pale and unappetizing. The room felt exposed, naked. "Ensure the primary security cameras are recording this entire interaction." Vitoni's voice was now the only sound. "We are documenting a guest threatening the establishment's license and an employee being physically assaulted by management." Assaulted. The word hung in the sterile air. He turned back to me. His face was still a mask, impossible to read. "Miss Sue Allen, you are finished for the night. Your shift is covered with full pay. Go home." I just nodded, my throat too tight to form words. Then his gaze shifted back to Jules, who was visibly shaking. "You are suspended, pending a full investigation. Leave your keys and your access card on the bar. Get out." I didn't wait to see Jules's reaction. I backed away, my legs feeling like water. I didn't run, but I moved fast. I grabbed my secondhand backpack from the staff locker, my hands shaking so hard I fumbled with the zipper. Behind me, I could hear Ramsey starting to shout something about lawyers and slander. I didn't hear Vittoni's reply. I was already pushing through the heavy oak doors, out into the night. The heavy, humid air of the Florida coast hit me like a wet towel. I stumbled to the brick wall of the building, leaning against it, just trying to get my breath back. The wind was picking up, carrying the smell of low tide and distant rain. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A man, a total stranger, had just stood up for me, but it didn't feel like being rescued. It felt different. My employee. He'd said, twice, like I was a piece of property. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't threatened, he'd just taken control. He dismantled the entire situation in less than 60 seconds. How did he know exactly what to do? What to say? My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. A small part of me thought it might be Jules, begging me to come back and fix this. I pulled it out. The screen was bright in the darkness. It was a text from my landlord. "Emergency notice, Bayline Court. Building has failed critical safety inspection. Per GCD directive. Immediate remediation required. Rent increasing by 40%, effective immediately to cover fines." I read it twice. 40%, that wasn't a rent hike. That was an eviction notice. Failed inspection. The building was old, but it wasn't falling down. The Gulf Compliance Directorate that sounded serious. Immediately, a cold dread, sharper than the wind, settled in my stomach. I looked back through the polished glass doors of the briny Finch. I could see the silhouettes moving in the harsh white light. One of them was Cade Ramsey, the man who'd called me trash. The other was Dimitar Vittoni, the man who'd just claimed me. I'd just been saved by one shark, only to get a text message that proved I was swimming in an ocean full of them. The bus ride home was a crawl through a different city. The briny Finch was all sparkling glass and air conditioning that smelled like cucumber water. My neighborhood, just 3 miles south, smelled like hot pavement, rust, and the algae bloom in the canal. I got off at my stop, the 40% rent hike from that text message feeling like a lead weight in my stomach. 40%? It was an impossible number. I was halfway down the alley that cuts behind the laundromat, my usual shortcut, when I heard a moan. It was low, sick, not a drunken happy sound, but a please help me sound. I stopped. My keys were already in my fist, threaded between my fingers. You learn to do that fast, living here. "Hello." Behind a stack of discarded pallets, a woman was slumped against the brickwork. It was the woman from Ramsey's table, the one in the sequin dress. My nursing instincts took over. Shoving the waitress part of me aside, I was at her side in a second. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered. She was pale, her skin clammy and cold despite the humid night. Her pupils were tiny pinpricks. "Cade," she mumbled. "He's so much." Okay, just breathe for me." I checked her pulse. It was thready and fast. This wasn't just alcohol. I knew what drunk looked like. I served it every night. This was something else. This was an overdose. I pulled out my phone and called 911, giving the location clearly. As I was talking to the operator, my eyes scanned the ground around her. Her small, beaded clutch was spilled open. Lipstick, keys, a credit card, and a half-empty glass, the same glass from the club. How did it get here? Did they just dump her? I recognized the drink. It was supposed to be a Harbor Key Sunset, a light, fruity vodka drink, but I remembered the color. When I'd seen her 20 minutes before Ramsey shouted at me, her drink was a pale pink. Now, the dregs in this glass were a murky, chemical orange. They hadn't just overserved her, they'd added something. A booster shot, as the kitchen guys sometimes called the illegal synthetics that other, sleazier clubs used. Ramsey hadn't been angry that I was cutting her off. He'd been angry that I was interrupting. The paramedics arrived. their movements fast and professional. I gave them a quick report what I saw at the club, her vital signs as I found them. "You're a student," one of them asked, as they lifted her onto the gurney. "Nursing," I said, rubbing my arm where Jules had grabbed me. "Good instincts. You probably saved her life." I watched them go, the red lights washing over the alley walls. I felt sick. That could have been me. That could be any woman in that club, if Cade Ramsey decided she was rubbish. I finally made it to Bayline Court. The building isn't much. A 4-story block of faded 60s-era concrete and rusty railings, but it was my grandmother's. It was the only home I had. Tonight, it felt different. There was a crowd of tenants clustered around the main entrance, all talking over each other in a panic. Mrs. Betancourt, my grandmother's oldest friend from apartment 2B, saw me and waved me over, her face creased with worry. "Morgan, honey, did you see it? Did you see the sign?" I pushed through the small crowd. Taped to the glass door was a bright orange placard. It was an official notice from the GCD, the Gulf Compliance Directorate, the same agency from my landlord's text. "Notice of immediate reinspection and structural hazard." "They're saying the building is unsafe," a man from the 3rd floor said, his voice shaking. "They're saying potential collapse risk. Collapse, I've lived here for 20 years. This was why the rent was going up, this inspection. It was a sham. It had to be." I went to my mailbox. The dread in my stomach was a cold, hard knot. Tucked between a pizza flyer and a utility bill was a crisp white envelope from Sunset Municipal Services, the management company I'd never heard of until they took over last month. I tore it open. It wasn't just a notice. It was an invoice. A mandatory structural refurbishment fee. The amount made my vision swim. It was thousands of dollars, due in 14 days, or eviction proceedings will commence. It wasn't a rent hike. It was a battering ram. I finally made it upstairs to my apartment, the walls of the hallway feeling like they were closing in. I triple-locked the door and leaned against it, just breathing. My small apartment was my sanctuary, my grandmother's faded armchair, her collection of mismatched teacups, my stacks of textbooks. I dropped my backpack and went straight to my desk. I pulled out a worn, spiral-bound notebook. This was my other set of notes, the ones that weren't about human anatomy. I opened to a new page. At the top, I wrote Cade Ramsey. Underneath, I wrote the Briny Finch Jules Pike. And then, I wrote Suncoast Licensing Board SLB. Ramsey had been so arrogant, dropping that name. He was bragging. He wanted us to know he owned them. I wrote down the exact phrase he'd used, low trin so 19, Route 19. It sounded like a code. I went to my laptop and pulled up the photos I'd saved last week. I'd been keeping a small file ever since Jules started getting weird about inventory. I'd done a quick search on Ramsey. There he was, in a social media post, grinning on a yacht at the Harbor Key Marina. I saved the photo. It wasn't just the boat. It was the logo on the warehouse in the background, Ramsey Holdings. I sat back, a man who brags about owning the city licensing board, a management company, Sunset Municipal Services, that appears out of nowhere. A sudden, bogus safety inspection from a city agency, the GCD, and a massive, impossible fee designed to force us all out. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. This was an attack. My phone buzzed on the desk, a new message, not a text, but a direct message on a social media app I barely used. The sender was an anonymous account, no picture, just a scramble of letters. The message had 2 things. First, a video file. I clicked it. My stomach dropped. It was a video of me, from tonight, filmed from across the room at the Briny Finch. It showed Jules grabbing my arm, me wincing, Ramsey sneering. It was shaky, like it was filmed on a phone, but it was clear. Second, a line of text. Heard you had a bad night. Don't go back. The night shift isn't safe for you anymore. My hands were shaking again. Someone filmed it. Someone watched it all happen. And instead of helping, they sent me this, a warning. Or was it a threat? I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't breathe. I needed to talk to someone. I unlocked my door and went down the hall, knocking on 2B Mrs. Betancourt opened it, still in her housecoat, her eyes red. "Morgan, it's awful, isn't it? They're trying to steal our homes." "Mrs. B," I said, keeping my voice low. "Who is Sunset Municipal Services and who did this inspection?" She motioned me inside, her apartment a mirror of my own, just with more cats. "I made some calls. Honey, my nephew works in permits. He says this is happening all over the coast. The inspector who signed that orange notice, he doesn't work for the GCD. He works for a private firm, a subsidiary of Ramsey Holdings." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Cade Ramsey. The man who called me trash. The man whose friends I'd refused to poison. He wasn't just a nightlife sleaze. He was trying to take my home. He was doing this to Mrs. Betancourt, to everyone in my building. It all clicked. The pressure on the briny Finch, the threats about the SLB, the booster shot in that poor woman's drink. The sudden inspection at my apartment, it was all one big, ugly net, and I was tangled right in the middle of it. I said goodnight to Mrs. B, promising her we'd figure something out. I went back to my apartment, but I couldn't stay inside. I took the rattling service elevator to the roof. The wind was strong up here, whipping my hair across my face. It smelled clean, like the storm was coming closer. From here, I could see the whole of Harbor Key, the marina, full of dark, sleeping yachts, the high-rises downtown, and further up the coast, the bright, obnoxious glow of the nightlife district, Cade Ramsey's kingdom. I looked down at my hands. They were raw from the bus railing. The imprint of Jules's fingers still a faint, angry red on my arm. The anonymous message told me to run. My landlord's invoice told me to run. Every sensible part of my brain was screaming at me to pack my bags, forget the nursing degree, and just get out of this city. But I thought of my grandmother, who had scrubbed floors to keep this apartment. I thought of Mrs. Betancourt, crying in her housecoat. I thought of that girl in the alley, dumped like a piece of garbage. No, I wasn't running. I hated the briny Finch. I hated the uniforms, the fake smiles, and the entitled men. But right now, it was the only place I could be. It was the center of the web. If I was going to fight Ramsey for my home, I had to go back. I had to stand my ground, not just for me, for all the people like me. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another threat. I pulled it out, a new text message from an unknown number. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was just 5 words. "Tomorrow, return. You are not alone." I stared at the screen, the wind howling around me. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew, with a sudden, terrifying certainty, exactly who had sent it. Dimitar Vitoni, the man from Table 9, the man who had claimed me. I realized, standing on that roof, that I hadn't been trapped between 2 sharks. I had been targeted by one, and I had just been claimed by the other. I didn't sleep. The text message, "You are not alone," buzzed in my pocket all night, a tiny, heavy vibration against my leg. Sleep was impossible. My mind was a racetrack of Cade Ramsey's sneer, the 40% rent hike, and the cold, assessing eyes of Dimitar Vitoni. At 5:30 in the morning, when the sky over Harbor Key was a bruised, humid gray, a car slowed to a stop outside Bayline Court. It wasn't a flashing, look-at-me sports car. It was a heavy, dark sedan, the kind that looks armored even when it isn't. It didn't have a speck of chrome. I went down, and he was in the driver's seat, the engine a low, imperceptible rumble. I got in. The silence inside was absolute. It smelled of clean leather and cool air. "You're early," he said. It wasn't an accusation, just a data point. "You said to return?" My voice sounded small. He didn't drive toward the briny Finch. He drove toward the water, past the new condo towers, to the old industrial side of the port. He parked at the end of a splintered, abandoned fish pier. The wood was bleached silver by the sun, and the air was so thick with salt it felt wet. The only sounds were the sharp cries of gulls and the rhythmic slap of the tide against the rotting pilings. We got out and stood by the railing, watching the sun try to burn through the morning fog. He didn't look at me, but I knew he was aware of the ugly, purple-blue marks on my arm, right where Jules had grabbed me. "He marked you," he said. I instinctively reached for my cheap plastic medic alert bracelet, a nervous tic I've had since I was a kid. "Give me your hand." I hesitated. My heart was doing a stupid, fast rhythm. I held it out, palm down. He didn't pull out a first aid kit. From the inside pocket of his jacket, he took a small, foil-wrapped square. He tore it open. Inside was a single, high-quality adhesive bandage. It was a soft, pale mint green. He didn't ask permission. He gently unclasped the old, frayed plastic bracelet from my wrist. For a second, I felt naked without it. Then he tossed it, and it spun once before disappearing into the dark water below, with a touch that was surprisingly light, almost clinical. He smoothed the mint green bandage over the worst of the bruises. "A temporary fix," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Thank you." He nodded, his eyes still on my wrist. "He grabbed you here." He held up his own hand, a stark contrast to mine. His was steady, scarred at the knuckles, and clean. "Give me your arm again, I did. His fingers closed around my wrist. It wasn't a grab, it wasn't aggressive, it was just present. "When someone grips you," he said, his voice dropping into a quiet, instructional tone, "they expect you to pull straight back. That is a contest of strength. You will lose." His grip tightened, just enough to mimic Jules. My instinct was to yank away. "Don't pull," he commanded. "Go with the grip. Find the weak point. It is always the thumb." He showed me. He guided my arm in a sharp, sudden rotation, not against the cage of his 4 fingers, but against the single point of his thumb. It was a fast, fluid movement, using my own bone as a lever. His grip broke instantly. "Now," he said, "you do it to me." I took a breath and grabbed his wrist. It was like holding onto a warm piece of rebar. "Harder," he ordered. I squeezed, my fingers aching. He just watched me. I tried the move, twisting my wrist hard against his thumb. He didn't even flinch. Again, not strength, leverage. I tried again, focusing on the angle, the quick snap of my elbow. His hand opened. We were standing very close. I could feel the warmth radiating from his chest, cutting the damp, salty air. I could smell the faint, clean scent of soap, mixed with the ocean. My pulse was hammering in my throat. "It is not about power, Miss Allen," he said, taking a small step back, shattering the bubble of proximity. "It is about leverage. Never let them set the terms of the fight." I rubbed my wrist. This was not a normal businessman. This was not a normal boss. His eyes weren't warm. They were scanners. Processing data, his words didn't comfort. They cut. They cut right through the messy emotions to the mechanical solution. He drove us to a tiny, walk-up coffee kiosk tucked away near the marina, the kind the longshoremen used. "What do you drink?" he asked, his hand already on his wallet. "Oh, regular. Lots of milk, 2 sugars. He turned to the half-asleep barista, 1 black, 1 with milk, 2 sugars. The barista grunted, handing us 2 identical, steaming paper cups. We walked back to the car. The fog was starting to lift. I took a deep sip. It was pure, bitter, black battery acid. I coughed, the heat scorching my throat. Dimitar had already taken a long drink from his... He paused, mid-swallow. A look of faint confusion crossed his face. "This is sweet." We'd taken the wrong cups. "Oh, God, I'm sorry," I said, holding out the black coffee. "Here, let's swap." He just looked at my cup, then at the one in his hand. He shook his head, a barely perceptible motion. "It's fine." And he took another deliberate drink of my sugary, milky coffee, his expression unreadable. I stared at him. Then I looked down at the cup of black coffee in my hand. Fine. If he could drink mine, I could drink his. I took another sip. It was awful, but I didn't choke this time. We sat in the silent, parked car, the engine off. "You're going back to the club tonight," he stated. "I have to." The coffee, or maybe the adrenaline, made the words spill out. Cade Ramsey, he's connected to the company that's trying to evict my entire building. Sunset Municipal Services. They're using a fake GCD inspection, saying the building is unsafe. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to sound calm. I told them about my grandmother, how she lived in apartment 2B her whole life, how I'm trying to finish my nursing degree, and the tuition is a nightmare. And now, this 40% hike, this refurbishment fee. I stopped, horrified. I sounded like I was begging. I straightened my spine. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm just telling you why I can't run. I'm telling you why I'm going back. He listened. He didn't nod, didn't interrupt. He just watched the steam rise from Maya's coffee cup. When I finished, the silence stretched, filled only by the distant gulls. He turned his head and looked at me, his gaze so direct it felt physical, like a hand on my chin. I don't fix the world. Morgan, he said. He used my first name. It sounded different in his voice. The world is broken, but if something touches you... He paused, the words hanging in the air. I move it. When I walked into the briny Finch for my shift that evening, the atmosphere was electric. The staff was whispering. Anya Sokol, the sharp, impossibly chic woman in the severe suit, was waiting for me. Dimitar was nowhere to be seen. Miss Allen, she said, her voice crisp. She handed me a small, flat black object. This is a communication pin. It's also a high-fidelity microphone. Keep it on at all times. We are logging all guest and staff interactions for quality assurance. And for threats, I thought... Then she handed me a laminated card, like a key card, but thicker. This is your new authority card. Mr. Vitoni has updated your status. You now have full and final authority to refuse service to any guest for safety reasons. There is no management override. She tapped the card. Your clinical judgment is now house policy. I stared at it. It was heavier than it looked. It was respect. It was armor. I walked into the main dining room to set my tables. And there he was. Jules. He was standing by the bar, not behind it. He was wearing his manager's suit, but it looked too big for him. He looked pale, diminished. He saw me and flinched, unable to meet my eyes. Jules, I said. My voice was steady. The fear I usually felt around him was gone. Morgan, hey, look about last night. I was under a lot of pressure. Mr. Ramsey, I'm not interested. I cut him off, my voice cold. Anya tells me you're no longer in charge of the bar. Temporarily, he said, too quickly. Just temporarily, while they investigate. Good, I said, because your first new assignment is retraining. You and every other server, FOH and BOH. We're going to have a mandatory class on responsible beverage service and de-escalation tactics. I held up my new card. 8A, tomorrow. Be on time, I'll be teaching it. He looked like I'd just slapped him, but after a long, agonizing second, he just deflated. Yes, Morgan. The shift was strange. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, but for the first time, I knew there was a net. I saw Dimitar, and he was at table 9 again, alone, his back to the wall. He wasn't eating, he was working. A laptop open, the glow of the screen reflecting in his dark eyes. He was watching. Later, I was in the dry goods storage, buried in paperwork. Jules had let the order logs become a total disaster. I was cross-referencing invoices, trying to figure out where the numbers weren't adding up. I felt a presence and looked up. Dimitar was standing in the doorway, just watching. Can I help you, Mr. Vitoni? I asked, my pen halfway through a line item. You seem to have it under control. He said he didn't offer to help. He didn't give advice. He just observed, nodded once, and walked away, leaving me to my work. He wasn't crowding me. He was giving me the space to take charge. An hour later, a crisis, table 12, a big party, got the wrong entrees, all of them. The kitchen had misread the ticket. The table was getting loud, the host red-faced. I stepped in. I apologized, took full responsibility, comped their appetizers without asking, and personally walked the new ticket back to the kitchen. I had 2 new correct orders on their table in less than 5 minutes. I even managed to make the angry host laugh about a mix-up he'd had last week. As I walked away, my shoulders relaxing, I caught a glimpse of Table 9. Dimitar was watching me, and there it was, a tiny, almost invisible smile. It was there for a half a second, and then it was gone, suppressed. But I'd seen it. The shift finally ended. It was 14 minutes past 1 in the morning. I was exhausted, but I wasn't broken. I was energized. I pulled out my phone and texted the unknown number. Thank you. I didn't expect a reply. I was already halfway to the bus stop when my phone buzzed. It was 1:22 a.m., exactly 8 minutes later. The reply, go to sleep. It was so short, so blunt, but I found myself smiling at the screen. It was, strangely, the warmest good night I'd ever received. I was starving. The smell of grilled onions and corn tortillas wafted from the taco truck that parked at the corner after midnight. It was a beacon. As I got closer, I saw a familiar dark sedan parked in the shadows next to it. Dimitar was leaning against the truck, a white paper bag in his hand. You're still here, I said, surprised. Inventory, he replied. Carnitas. Yes. He had already ordered for me. He handed me one wrapped in foil. We stood there on the empty sidewalk, under a flickering streetlight, eating tacos. The silence was comfortable. He won't stop, I said quietly, the taco suddenly tasting like ash. Ramsey. No, he won't. That authority card, I said, tapping my pocket. It won't stop him from seizing my apartment building. No, Dimitar agreed. It won't. I reached for a napkin from the truck's dispenser at the same time he did. Our hands brushed, just a graze of his knuckles against mine. But a jolt of static electricity shot right up my arm. Neither of us pulled away. So what's the plan? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You're the plan, Morgan. You're the one who knows how to read the chart. I went back to the club the next day on my off time, fueled by his words and black coffee. I wasn't just a waitress. I was the one who could read the chart. I went straight to Jules's old office and the mountain of invoices he'd let stack up. If Ramsey was squeezing the club, the proof would be in the numbers. I was going to find the rot. And I found it. It was an invoice from 3 weeks ago, from Harbor Key Audio Solutions. An order for 12 new lounge speakers. It was signed and approved by Jules Pike. The price made my stomach clench. It was easily triple what the equipment was worth. But it was the address at the bottom of the page that made my blood run cold. Harbor Key Audio Solutions, 1400 Marina Way. I knew that address. I pulled up the photo I'd saved of Cade Ramsey on his yacht. The warehouse in the background, Ramsey Holdings. It was the same address. This was it. He was bleeding the club dry from the inside, and Jules was his willing accomplice. I grabbed my red pen, the one I used for anatomy class, for marking arteries and critical pathways. I circled the inflated price. I circled the Marina Way address, and then, with a hand that was perfectly steady, I drew a thick, angry red line right through Jules's signature. That's a good color on him. I jumped, clutching the invoice to my chest. Dimitar was standing in the doorway, watching me. He must have been there for minutes. He wasn't smiling. He was impressed. He looked at the red ink on the paper, then at me, the one holding the pen. You don't need me to save you, Morgan, he said, his voice quiet, almost soft. You just need a battlefield where you can finally win. I looked down at the red line I'd drawn. It was right. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't rubbish. I was the one holding the pen. The red pen in my hand felt heavier than a weapon. My discovery of that fraudulent invoice, the one linking Jules and Cade Ramsey's shell company, wasn't an ending. It was just the first shell casing hitting the floor. Dimitar's battlefield was one of data, and his team moved fast. The next morning, Anya Sokol, his razor-sharp assistant, laid a thin file on the manager's desk where I was drinking my now preferred black coffee. Say, Beacon Risk found it, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. She tapped the cover sheet. The booster shot from the woman in the alley. I leaned in. The lab report was technical, but the summary was brutally simple. Citrine Boost 34. It wasn't just a high-dose synthetic. It was a custom blend. And the label, it traced back to a small batch distributor in Miami whose only client in Harbor Key was Ramsey's chain of nightclubs. He wasn't just trying to get the girl drunk. He was field testing his own poison. He was trying to get us shut down. I breathed, the pieces clicking. If she'd been found in our club, with that in her system, we'd lose our license before sunrise. Anya finished. As if on cue, the response from Ramsey's network came. Anya's tablet chimed. Well, speak of the devil. She turned the screen to me. The Suncoast Licensing Board. They're moving our annual inspection from next month to tomorrow morning. I read the email. It was polite, professional, and terrifying. Due to scheduling conflicts, it read, and then the payload, to ensure no disruption in service. We recommend paying the expedited processing fee to finalize your review within 24 hours. It was extortion, written on official letterhead, a 5-figure fee. My mind snagged on the wording, scheduling conflicts. I pulled my backpack off the floor and dug out the crumpled notice from Bayline Court, the bright orange placard from the GCD, the Gulf Compliance Directorate. I smoothed it out on the desk next to Anya's tablet. My heart stopped. Anya, I whispered, my finger tracing the text. Look, it wasn't just a similar tactic. It was identical. The GCD notice was issued on the same day as the SLB's initial now-changed inspection date. The municipal code cited on my apartment notice had a typo, a missing digit. The SLB email, referencing the same statute, had the exact same typo. It's a template, I said, feeling sick. This isn't just corruption. This is a copy-paste system. He's running the same play on my home and on my job. Dimitar was at table 9, his back to the wall, a laptop open. He hadn't been home. He just worked. We showed him the 2 documents. He stared at them for a long time. The only sound was the clink of the morning prep staff setting up the bar. Route 19 inches, he said, testing the words, the code Ramsey had boasted about. Anya, he said, his voice quiet. File a public records request with the MIC, the Metropolitan Integrity Commission. I want all communications, internal and external, referencing Route 19 at the SLB. I watched Anya make the call. She was polite, firm, and used language I didn't understand. I heard her say, "Yes, I'll hold." She held for 10 minutes. "Yes, pending review." "Thank you." She hung up and looked at Dimitar. "It's been flagged." "Try the digital portal," he said. She typed, clicked, frowned. "The request file has been corrupted. Error 404. "Physical messenger," Dimitar said, not looking up from his screen. An hour later, one of Beacon's security team, a guy built like a refrigerator, came back empty-handed. They said the intake form was misfiled. Sir, they have no record of it. Lost, twice in one morning. "They have an insider," Anya stated, her arms crossed. "Someone at the MIC is burying our requests the second they come in. Any official challenge we make, they'll see it coming a mile away." "I agree." Dimitar finally closed his laptop. He looked at me, and his gaze was heavy. "So we stop fighting on their track. We fight on 2. He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the marina. "Track 1, he said, looking at Anya, "is legal. Data. We build a clean, cold, unassailable case file. We find the money. We find the weak link. No press. No noise." Then he turned, and his eyes found mine. "Track 2 is social. The human cost. They're watching me, the owner, for a lawsuit. They aren't watching you, the nursing student. They aren't watching Mrs. Betancourt in 2B. A cold, fierce energy shot through me. I understood. He wasn't just giving me a battlefield. He was giving me an army. So I went to work, not just at the club, but at home. I spent my days at Bayline Court, clipboard in hand, my nursing scrubs on. They trusted me. I wasn't an investigator. I was Morgan. I listened. "Mrs. Betancourt let me into her apartment. "He was here for 5 minutes, honey," she said, wringing her hands. "The inspector. He just tapped the wall here." She pointed to a spot by the window and said, "Yep, terminal decay." He didn't even test the water. "Mr. Diaz on the 3rd floor showed me his mandatory safety repair. Sunset Municipal Services had charged him $800. The repair was a single, thin coat of beige paint right over the jagged crack in his wall. It was shoddy. It was insulting. It was just enough for a photograph. I took my own photographs. I recorded their stories. I collected copies of their invoices, the safety fees, the expedite charges, the refurbishment bills, all of it. Payable to Sunset Municipal Services, all of it. A death sentence for their savings. While I was gathering stories, Anya was gathering hard data. Beacon Risk found the supply chain for the citrine boost. It was moving through a single, shady distributor, so Anya did something brilliant. She had one of her Beacon Risk guys pose as a new bar owner looking to cut corners. He placed an order. When the crate arrived, it wasn't just bottles. Anya had arranged for a tiny, military-grade RFID tag to be affixed to the bottom of the wooden crate. They let the distributor pick it up, and then they tracked it. It didn't go to one of Ramsey's clubs. It didn't go to the distributor's main warehouse. It went to a small, nondescript lockup, Unit 7C, at Marina Storage. Marina Storage, the same complex as Harbor Key Audio Solutions, the shell company that had triple-billed us for speakers. It wasn't a web, it was a knot, and Ramsey was holding all the strings. The pressure was hitting everyone. Jules was a ghost. He was doing his mandatory retraining, his eyes hollow, his hands shaking. He cornered me by the ice machine one afternoon, his face slick with sweat. "Morgan, please," he whispered, shooting a look over his shoulder. "What is it, Jules?" I was tired of him. "They came to me, Ramsey's people. They said they know I'm suspended. They said they can make it all go away. They'll get me a job at one of his places." "What do they want, Jules?" He wouldn't meet my eyes, and he was staring at my mic pin. "They want me to sign a statement, and they want me to say that you were the one, that you had a personal issue with Ramsey, that you were the one who overpoured that drink for the girl, that you're unstable." My blood ran cold. "They want you to frame me." I told them I needed to think," he stammered. "Morgan, he'll ruin me. He'll ruin you. What do I do?" "You tell the truth," I said, my voice hard. "You tell Mr. Vittoni exactly what they offered you." "You don't get it," he hissed, grabbing my arm. I didn't even flinch. I just performed the move, the leverage against the thumb. He yelped, stumbling back, clutching his wrist, his eyes wide with shock. "Don't touch me," I said. "You're scared, but you should be more scared of Mr. Vittoni than you are of Cade Ramsey." I left him there, shaking. Dimitar was moving on his track, the Port Commerce Week Gala. I saw the photos online the next day, him in a flawless black tuxedo, a shadow among the glittering peacocks of Harbor Key. He told me what happened later, his voice flat, analytical. He'd found Serena Voss, the vice chair of the SLB, the woman who had signed the expedite fee demand. He'd cornered her by the champagne fountain. He didn't accuse, he sympathized. "It must be difficult, Miss Voss," he'd said, his voice a smooth, sympathetic murmur. "Managing the port's reputation, all that fog of bureaucracy, especially with so many unreliable partners." She'd sipped her champagne, giving him a tight, political smile. "The fog is thick, Mr. Vittoni, but we navigate it. It's best not to dredge the bottom. You never know what's been left down there." "I prefer to know," he'd replied, his own smile just as empty. "I find the low trin so 19 particularly murky." He said her hand stopped halfway to her mouth. Her smile froze. That's an internal designation. How do you—" She'd just confirmed it. She'd just confirmed the code Ramsey had boasted about. Anya leveraged that confirmation. 2 days later, a new file landed in my encrypted inbox. It wasn't a public document, it was a snapshot, taken by one of Anya's contacts from inside the SLB file room. A phone picture, blurry but readable. It was a stack of red-tabbed folders, bound with a thick rubber band, and on the label, clear as day, Project Route 19, internal priority, SV, approval only. SV, Serena Voss. This was it, the smoking gun, the illegal, pay-to-play fast-track lane for Ramsey's entire empire. "We have to release this," I said, my voice buzzing with adrenaline. We were in the office. Just me and Dimitar. This proves everything. This proves the SLB is corrupt. "No." I stared at him. "No. What do you mean? No." "We send this to the press," he said, his voice patient, as if explaining a simple math problem. "And Serena Voss becomes the scapegoat. The city will launch an investigation. They'll fire her. Ramsey will lose nothing. He'll just promote a new Voss. And the system continues. This isn't the weapon, Morgan. This is the sight on the rifle. We wait until the real target is in the open." He was right. He was always infuriatingly right. He was waiting to find out who was getting paid. I felt a surge of frustration. I went back to the storage room, back to the evidence. The empty bottles of Citrine Boost 34 that Beacon Risk had collected from the dumpsters. I stared at them. Something was wrong. As part of the retraining I was forcing on Jules, I'd been studying our new inventory protocols. Beacon Risk was meticulous. Every bottle of liquor that came through our official channels was sealed with a new, high-tech polymer strip. When you broke it, it left a specific, clean edge. I picked up one of the empty Citrine Boost bottles. The foil seal on the neck was broken, but it was also scratched. I ran my fingernail over it. It wasn't a clean tear. It was a jagged, chewed-up line. It was the mark of an old-style metal crimper, the kind you use to reseal a bottle, the kind the briny Finch had thrown in the garbage 6 months ago when Beacon took over. My breath hitched. This meant the bottles weren't just from Ramsey's supplier. They were refilled, and they came into our club through an unofficial channel, not the main delivery dock. They were off-book. Someone inside our club was physically stocking them on the bar, bypassing our entire inventory system. Someone with a manager's key. Someone like Jules. This wasn't just extortion. This was an infiltration. This was how Ramsey was going to set us up. The week ended. It was Saturday night. The club was packed. I was running drinks. My mic pin secure. My authority card heavy in my pocket. I felt a new confidence. I had the facts. I had the sight. The front doors opened. Cade Ramsey walked in. He wasn't with a party. He wasn't drunk. He was alone, in a crisp, expensive suit, and he looked perfectly, terrifyingly sober. He walked straight to the bar, where I was loading the garnish tray. He didn't shout. He didn't sneer. He leaned in close, his cologne a sickeningly sweet wave. He smiled, a wide, predatory, politician smile. "Enjoying the new job? Morgan," he murmured, his voice a silky threat. "You look good in your little apron. It's a nice color." I didn't flinch. My heart was a cold stone in my chest. "Can I get you something, Mr. Ramsey? Or are you just here to admire the inventory?" His smile widened. It was all teeth. "Oh, I'm just admiring the view. It's always so temporary." He tapped the polished bar top, his eyes locking on mine, cold and dead. "Next week," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "will be your last week here, for anything." He turned, smooth as a shark, and walked out. The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He wasn't just threatening my job, he was threatening me. Cade Ramsey's voice was a toxic echo in my head. "Next week will be your last week." The shift didn't just end, it collapsed. The adrenaline that had held me upright, that had fueled my defiant retort, drained away, leaving a hollow, aching space behind. The music seemed too loud, the lights too bright. I reached my locker and swayed, a wave of dizziness washing over me. I wasn't just tired, I was sick. A low-grade fever had been simmering under my skin all night, and now it was making a full-scale assault. A chill racked my body, making my teeth chatter. "Morgan," Dimitar was there. He wasn't at table 9. He was standing right behind me, his dark suit absorbing the frantic energy of the room. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't have to. "You're unwell," he stated. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice a raspy whisper. "Just a long shift." "You have a fever." He didn't touch me, but his gaze was as diagnostic as a thermometer. "I'm driving you home." It wasn't an offer. I didn't have the energy to argue. I just nodded, grabbing my backpack. The ride in his dark sedan was a vacuum. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, streaks of neon in a silent, upholstered void. The only sound was the radio, tuned to a late-night jazz station, the brushed snare and the melancholy saxophone so quiet it sounded less like music and more like breathing. I leaned my hot forehead against the cool, clean glass of the passenger window. Cade's threat felt distant, unreal. The only thing that felt real was the solid, quiet presence of the man in the driver's seat. He pulled up to Bayline Court. The street was empty, the air thick and heavy. He got out when I did. "You don't have to walk me up," I murmured, fumbling for my keys. "I do." He followed me up the 3 flights of rattling stairs. In the dim hallway, I stopped at my apartment door, 3A, the overhead light. The one I'd complained to Sunset Municipal about for a month was in its death throes, buzzing and flickering like a captured moth. I went to put my key in the lock, but Dimitar put a hand on the doorframe, stopping me. He just looked up at the light fixture. "This is a hazard," he said. "It's been that way for weeks. They don't fix things. They just send invoices. Stay here." He turned and went back down the stairs, his footsteps fast and silent. I stood there, confused and shivering, leaning against the wall. He returned less than 2 minutes later, holding a small, black canvas tool roll. Before I could protest, he'd pulled a new high-efficiency bulb from a pocket I hadn't known he had. He didn't just swap it. He used a tool from the roll, checking the fixture itself, tightening a loose wire, and securing the glass globe until it was firm. When he was done, a clean, steady, white light illuminated the dingy hallway. "Negligence is how they win," he said, his voice flat. I finally managed to get the key in the lock. The deadbolt was loose, and the knob assembly rattled in the door. It took 2 tries to get it to catch. He saw. He put a hand on the door, pushing it gently. The entire lock mechanism shifted. "This is not secure." "It's the best I've got." He shook his head. He knelt, unrolled his kit again, and produced a driver. He didn't just tighten the screws. He removed the strike plate, examined the frame, and made a small adjustment I couldn't even see. He re-drilled, tightened, and tested it. All in less than 3 minutes. When he stood up, he motioned for me to close the door. I did. He locked it from the outside, then unlocked it. I tried from the inside. The bolt slid home with a heavy, solid thunk, a sound I had never heard before. He had fixed my safety. I opened the door to thank him, and the sky opened. The rain didn't start. It attacked. It was a tropical squall, hitting the pavement with a roar. As I stood in the doorway, a flash of lightning lit up the hallway, followed by an immediate concussive whump as the transformer down the street blew. The new, steady light in the hall vanished. My apartment behind me went black. The entire building, the entire street was plunged into a sudden, suffocating darkness. The only sound was the wind, howling like a living thing. "Well," I said, my voice shaking. "Crap." A beat of silence in the dark. "Do you have candles?" he asked. He stepped inside, pushing the door closed against the wind that was trying to force its way in. He was in my apartment. The small, safe space was suddenly charged, filled with his presence. "I have a flashlight," I said, my teeth chattering again. "In the kitchen. I was going to make tea." "Sit down." I found the flashlight and clicked it on. Its weak beam cut through the dark, landing on the small sofa by the window. We sat, not next to each other, but at opposite ends, watching the storm. The lightning was almost constant, illuminating the room and strobing, ghostly flashes. The wind slammed the rain against the glass. I shivered, a violent, bone-deep tremor. The fever was spiking. "You're cold," he observed. He stood, moved through the dark as if he could see, and found the old Afghan my grandmother had knitted. It was on the back of her armchair. He came back to the sofa. I expected him to just hand it to me. Instead, he sat down, closer this time. He unfolded the blanket and draped it over my shoulders, and then over his own. It was a practical gesture, sharing body heat, but it pulled us into the same small, warm orbit. The wool was scratchy and smelled like cedar. I was still shaking. "Your fever is higher," he said, his voice a low rumble under the storm. In the next flash of lightning, I saw him looking at me. He lifted his hand. It wasn't fast. It was deliberate. He didn't reach for my forehead. He slowly, carefully pressed the back of his knuckles against my cheek. My skin was fire. His was cool and dry. The touch was electric. It wasn't a caress. It was an assessment, but it was the most profoundly gentle thing I had ever felt. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't look away. The air between us was vibrating, charged with the ozone from the storm and something else, something I couldn't name. His thumb brushed, just once, against my jawline. "Morgan," he whispered. It was just my name, but it felt like a question. He leaned in. He moved so slowly, giving me every second, every inch to pull away. I didn't want to. His lips met mine. It wasn't the kiss I'd seen in movies. It wasn't hungry or desperate or demanding. It was quiet. It was deep. It was short. It was a promise. It tasted of the black coffee he'd been drinking and the metallic tang of the storm. I felt his other hand come to rest on the back of the sofa, behind my head. He wasn't pulling me in. He was bracing himself, giving me control of the space, of the distance. He was using all of his formidable control to give the power to me. He pulled back, just enough to see my eyes in the dark. I was completely overwhelmed. It wasn't the kiss. It was the choice. It was the feeling of being safe, of being seen. A single, hot tear escaped and ran down my temple. I did the only thing that felt right. I leaned forward and just rested my forehead against the solid, warm wool of his suit jacket, right over his shoulder. The dam broke. I cried, silently, my shoulders shaking. I let go of Cade Ramsey and the 40% hike and the fear and the grinding exhaustion. "No one," I whispered, my voice muffled, "has ever just let me choose." He didn't speak. He didn't pat my back or say it was okay. He just sat, solid as the pier, and let me lean. After a long moment, his hand came up, not to pat, but just to rest on the back of my head, his fingers a warm, steady weight in my hair. After a minute, I pulled back, embarrassed, wiping my face. "I'm sorry, I'm a mess." "You're not," he said simply. The tension was broken, replaced by a fragile, shared quiet. "I made tea," I said, trying to find my normal voice. "Before my shift, it's on the counter. It's cold." I heard the ghost of a smile in his voice. "We have a history of cold drinks." He found the flashlight and shined it on the counter. 2 mugs, cold, untouched. He picked one up. "My apartment has a gas stove," he said. "Yours is electric. I'll make new tea." "With what the power is out." He didn't answer. He found the candle I kept for decoration. He pulled a sleek silver lighter from his pocket and lit it. He found my kettle. Found the bottled water I kept for my nursing practicals. He filled the kettle and set it on the stove, positioning the small candle flame directly under it. It was going to take forever. "It will work," he said, eventually. We sat in the flickering candlelight, waiting for the water to heat. I was watching his hands, illuminated by the tiny flame, and I saw it. A tremor. His hand, the one resting on his knee, was not perfectly still. It was vibrating, a fine, high-frequency tremor. He wasn't a machine, he was human, and he was just as rattled as I was. "You're good at fixing things," I said quietly, to fill the silence. He stared into the flame. My father was a mechanic. Transport. He came from the Maghreb. My mother from the Balkans. They met in a processing center. After their homes were gone. This was the last thing I expected. He wasn't old money. He was an immigrant. He was like me. They built a small trucking company here in Florida, he continued, his voice low. They worked 18-hour days, and every time they got ahead, someone stronger, someone with a better name, would change the rules. A new fee, a lost permit, a sudden safety violation that only a bribe could fix. My heart ached. It sounded exactly... Yes, he said, as if reading my mind. It sounds familiar. I made a promise to my father before he died, he said, his voice flat, but vibrating with a white-hot intensity. I would never be weak again, and I would never, ever let the strong eat the weak. Not on my watch, not in my city. The kettle finally, mercifully, began to hiss. He poured the steaming water into the 2 mugs, over the old, cold tea bags. He handed one to me. The ceramic was a lifeline, warm against my palms. I needed him to see. I needed to offer a truth in return. I reached for my backpack, pulled out my wallet, and took out my student ID. The picture was awful. My hair slicked back, my eyes tired, but the words were clear. Morgan Allen, College of Nursing. I handed it to him. That's my promise. I whispered, it's the only thing I've ever really wanted, to be the one who knows how to fix things, to the right way. He looked at the ID card, his thumb brushing over my grainy photo. He looked up at me, and he understood. This was my weapon. This was my armor. The storm was easing. The roar of the wind had settled into a steady, driving rain. He stood, handing me back my ID. The storm is coming. Morgan, the real one. Cade Ramsey. He meant what he said. I know. He walked to the door he had fixed. When it hits, he said, I will be at your door. I stood, pulling the blanket tight. I looked at the solid lock, at him, at the warm tea in my hands. And I replied, my voice steady, will be the one who locks it behind us. As if summoned, the lights flickered. The refrigerator in the kitchen kicked on with a heavy hum. The power was back. The harsh fluorescent light of my kitchen shattered the intimate, candle-lit bubble. We were just 2 people, standing in a small, messy apartment, the remnants of a fever and a fight hanging in the air. He nodded once, the mask of control settling back onto his features. Your fever. You need medicine. Sleep. He left. The door closed with a solid, satisfying thunk. I leaned against it, my legs weak, my heart a confusing mix of terror and hope. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from him. Drink warm water? I smiled, a real tired smile. I was safe. The next day, the fever was down, the sun was out, the air scrubbed clean, but I felt a new dread. I logged onto the Bayline Court tenant portal, the one run by Sunset Municipal Services. I had to check the status of that impossible 40% fee. There was a community board on the site, usually just complaints about the laundry room. There was a new post from an anonymous user. My blood turned to ice. It was a picture, grainy, blurry, taken from outside my window, from across the street with a long-range lens, in the dark. It was a picture of 2 teacups on my windowsill, and 2 hands, mine, pale and small, his larger, resting near it. The picture had been taken in the dark, illuminated only by the candlelight. They had been watching me. Below the picture, a single caption. Looks like our little nurse in 3A is getting cozy with new friends. Is he going to pay your safety fee? It was a threat. It was a violation. Cade Ramsey was telling me that he saw everything, that not even my home was safe. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. My hand moved to the mouse. I right-clicked. I saved the image to my desktop. I renamed the file, Courage is a Habit, the photograph of my teacups, that grainy, violating image from Cade's spy, burned in my mind for exactly 12 hours. Then, the city itself provided a bigger, more immediate terror. Tropical Storm Helene. It had been a whisper in the Atlantic for days, a maybe storm. Then it wasn't. It organized itself with terrifying speed, its eye taking a sharp, vindictive turn straight for the harbor quay. Cade Ramsey hadn't just been speaking metaphorically. He was bringing the storm. The news channels, which had been obsessed with the Port Commerce Week, were now a frantic loop of weather maps and wind speed projections. But the real news, the news that mattered to me, didn't come from a meteorologist. It came from the Gulf Compliance Directorate. A new bright orange sign was plastered on the door of Bayline Court. This one wasn't a warning. It was an ultimatum. Mandatory preventative closure. By order of the GCD, this structure is deemed unfit for occupancy under severe weather conditions. The list of unfit buildings was short, and every single address on it, I later learned, was a property Ramsey Holdings had been trying to acquire. He was using the storm as his crowbar. I ran to the building, my shift at the Briny Finch forgotten. The lobby was pure chaos. Mrs. Betancourt was crying. Mr. Diaz was shouting into his phone. And outside, lined up at the curb, were 3 large, white moving trucks. The logo on the side made my blood run cold. Sunset Municipal Services. They weren't here to help us. They were here to evict us. A man in a cheap polo shirt with the Sunset logo was clipboard in hand, shouting over the rising wind. We are offering emergency relocation assistance for a one-time fee. We can move your valuables to a secure, off-site location. How much, mister? Diaz yelled. Standard relocation package is just $3,000, plus storage, cash or credit, up front. $3,000. It was predatory. It was demonic. They were vultures, using the storm as cover to pick our bones clean. People were panicking. Some were actually paying, dragging their trash bags full of clothes toward the trucks, signing their lives away on a clipboard. My phone rang. It was Dimitar. I didn't even say hello. He's doing it, I said, my voice breaking with rage, the wind whipping my hair. He's using the storm. He's got trucks here. I see them. I spun around. His black sedan was parked across the street. He wasn't watching me. He was watching the trucks. He's not just evacuating you. Dimitar's voice was a low, cold hum. He's robbing you. Anya just tracked the RFID tag on the citrine boost crate. What now? It's moving. The signal is coming from Marina Storage 7C. It's moving with the Sunset Municipal Relief Convoy. They're using their own rescue trucks to move their illegal stock. I felt sick. They were using my neighbor's panic as a diversion. Go to the Briny Finch, Morgan, Marhi ordered. Now. I'm not leaving them, I shouted over the wind. You won't be. You're going to prepare. We're opening the kitchen. An hour later, the Briny Finch was unrecognizable. Dimitar had sent out a single, encrypted blast to his entire staff. The jazz trio was gone. The reservation desk was gone. In its place, the kitchen was in overdrive, not making scallops, but massive. Steaming vats of lentil soup and rice. This is now a community kitchen, Dimitar announced to the skeleton crew. We are a designated shelter. Anyone who needs food or a dry place to wait gets it. No charge. I looked at him, stunned. He was turning Ramsey's weapon back on him. Morgan, he said, turning to me, this isn't a bar tonight. This is a clinic. You're in charge. My nursing instincts, the ones I'd been suppressing under an apron, flared to life. I need a first aid station here. I pointed to the alcove by the hostess stand. I need clean towels, bottled water, all the first aid kits from every floor, and the staff medical supplies, and I need someone who can follow orders. A voice, reedy and thin, spoke from behind me. It was Jules. He looked awful. He hadn't shaved in days. His manager's suit was rumpled, his eyes haunted. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since he'd tried to frame me. I can carry things, he stammered. I stared at him, my anger warring with the raw, immediate need. Fine, I snapped. Go to the kitchen, tell them I need hot water, clean rags, and 10 pounds of uncooked rice for cold compresses. Go, run. He looked, for a second, like he might cry with relief, He just nodded and ran. He was a man desperate for one last chance at redemption, and I was going to work him to the bone. The storm was hitting. The first of the evacuees, the ones who had nowhere else to go, started to trickle in. But as the wind rose, another group arrived. 4 men in slick, official-looking rain gear. They weren't here for shelter. They flashed badges. Suncoast Licensing Board, their leader announced, his eyes scanning the room. We've received an anonymous tip about code violations, tainted alcohol being served on premises. We're here for an emergency inspection. Cade's counterattack, in the middle of a hurricane. They weren't here to inspect. They were here to plant the citrine boost. Dimitar was on the phone, his back to me, coordinating something with the port. The SLB inspectors headed straight for the bar, their faces grim and purposeful. I stepped in front of them. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was calm. My heart was a block of ice. "Out of the way, Waitress. This is official business." "I'm Morgan Allen, the acting safety manager for this establishment," I said, holding up the laminated card Dimitar had given me. "And you will find our inventory is in perfect order." I pointed to the office. My desk, 3 binders. You'll find a complete time-stamped log of every bottle on property, cross-referenced with our supplier invoices, which are, of course, sealed with Beacon-certified polymer strips, the new ones. I gave him a smile that didn't touch my eyes. We also have a full chemical analysis of the off-book bottles we found last week, complete with notes on the unauthorized metal crimper seals. The report is already filed with Beacon Risk's legal team. The man's smug expression evaporated. He and his team looked at each other. I had just, politely, told them I already had proof of the very thing they were here to plant. They were walking into a trap. "We will start with the paperwork. Then." The man stammered, his authority vanishing. They were trapped. From across the room, Dimitar's phone call ended. He gave Anya an order I couldn't hear. She nodded, her fingers flying on her laptop. "Miss Sokol," Dimitar said. "Warehouse 7C. Lock it down. Use the maritime insurance warrant. I want that entire block sealed for potential toxic hazard." He was cutting off Ramsey's escape route. Then my phone rang. It was Mrs. Beaton Court. She was hysterical. "Morgan, the roof, the big skylight in the hall, it's gone. The wind, it's tearing the building apart. We're trapped." The storm had just escalated from a problem to a disaster. "Dimitar," I yelled. "Bayline Court, the roof is gone. They're trapped." He didn't hesitate, and he was already dialing. "Anya, divert the primary logistics trucks, our trucks, not Sunset's. Send them to Bayline Court. I want every resident out of that building and here, now." It was suddenly a rescue mission. And that's when Cade Ramsey played his final, desperate card. Anya's tablet lit up. Sir Ramsey is at the marina. He's on a live stream. The local news is picking it up. She turned the screen. There he was. Cade Ramsey, in a $1,000 rain slicker, standing in the howling wind, the crashing waves of the marina behind him. He looked like a mad, drenched king. "And in this time of crisis, he shouted, his face a mask of false sincerity. "We have businesses like the Briny Finch, hoarding supplies, refusing entry, and we have reports, credible reports, that they are storing counterfeit and dangerous liquor, endangering the public." "He's projecting," I whispered, horrified. "He's trying to get the police to raid us," Dimitar said, his voice deadly. "He's creating a public safety panic." "Sir," Anya said, her voice electric, "the maritime warrant went through. The insurance marshals are at 7C. They've activated their own remote surveillance. I have a live feed from inside the warehouse." Dimitar looked at Cade's ranting face on the tablet. He looked at Anya. A slow, cold smile touched his lips. "Anya, can you interrupt his feed?" "I can do better than that," she said. "I can embed." On the tablet, Cade was building to his climax. "We must demand the city shut them down for the safety of—" His feed flickered. A small box, a picture-in-picture, appeared in the corner of his live stream. No audio, just silent, damning video from a security camera. It showed the inside of Warehouse 7C. It showed pallets stacked to the ceiling. It showed a close-up of a label Citrine Boost 34, and in large, black stenciling on the side of the wooden crates, property of Ramsey Logistics. Cade didn't see it yet. He was still ranting. But the live chat, the stream of comments from Harbor Key residents, exploded. Wait, what is that? Is that Ramsey's logo? He's the one with the fake booze that's the warehouse at the marina? Cade's eyes flickered to the comments. He paled. He saw the embedded video. His face, for one glorious second, was a mask of pure, unfiltered rage and panic. The live stream ended. He'd cut it. But it was too late. Anya had already saved the recording. At that exact moment, the doors of the briny Finch flew open. It was the residents of Bayline Court, soaking wet, terrified, carried in by Dimitar's logistics team. Mrs. Betancourt, Mr. Diaz, and a dozen others. A woman ran in, screaming, her eyes wild. "My daughter Lucy. She wasn't, I can't find her." I didn't wait. I ran past the SLB inspectors, past Jules, out into the hall. Lucy. I saw a flash of pink, huddled behind a large, decorative urn. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, was curled into a tiny ball, hyperventilating. I dropped to my knees. My nurse's training took over. I didn't grab her. I kept my voice low and calm. "Hey, Lucy, I'm Morgan. That's a really scary sound, isn't it? Let's play a game. It's my favorite. It's the 5-4-3-2-1 game." She peeked at me, her eyes wide with terror. "Okay," I said softly. "Look around me. Can you find 5 blue things? I see one on my shoe." She was still breathing too fast, but she was listening. "Now, can you name 4 things you can feel? I feel the carpet, and my hair is all wet." I watched her mind lock onto the task. Her breathing slowed. My sock is wet," she whispered. That's perfect," and I said, smiling. "You're so good at this." I sat with her for another minute, until her breathing was normal. Then I gently scooped her up. I walked back into the main room, where her mother was collapsing in tears. I placed the little girl in her arms. The mother just held me, sobbing "thank you" over and over. The room was silent. The SLB inspectors were just standing there, their raid forgotten. Jules was watching me, his face a mixture of awe and shame. The storm hit its peak. The lights went out. A second later, Dimitar's backup generator kicked in, flooding the room in a steady, reliable light. I was on the floor, using a linen napkin to bandage a cut on Mr. Diaz's hand. I looked up. Dimitar was standing across the room, by table 9. He wasn't giving orders. He wasn't on the phone. He was just watching me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes. In that moment, I realized he wasn't just a boss or a protector. He was a witness. He was watching me become the person I was always meant to be. The storm had passed, the city was dark, but in the briny Finch, we were safe. And we had the evidence. We had the video. The war wasn't over, but we had just won the battle. The dawn after Helene was a mess of gray light and silence, broken only by the sound of dripping water and distant sirens. The briny Finch was a wreck, but an organized one. The dining room was a field hospital of sleeping bags and paper cups, but the kitchen was already clean. We had survived. But surviving isn't winning. While I was handing out the last of the hot coffee to Mrs. Betancourt, Anya Sokol was in the back office, running a new set of data. The storm had been a cover for Cade's logistics, and that had been his mistake. "Got it," she said, her voice sharp as glass. She spun a laptop around to face Dimitar. I walked over, wiping my hands on my apron. On the screen was a series of shipping manifests. Beacon Risk tracked the insurance data from Warehouse 7C. The Citrine Boost wasn't imported under Ramsey's name. It was brought in by a shell company. She pointed to a line of text Pelican Wharf Partners, LLC. Guess who the sole signatory is? A corporate lawyer on Cade Ramsey's payroll. This is the legal firewall. We just breached it. This was the track 1 data Dimitar had been waiting for. The clean, cold, undeniable paper trail that linked Cade, not just to his known companies, but to the poison itself. As if summoned by the devil. Dimitar's personal phone buzzed, not the one he used for business, but a sleek, burner-thin device. He looked at the screen, and a look of cold amusement passed over his face. "Interesting," he said. "The Metropolitan Integrity Commission. They'd like an off-the-record meeting, immediately." "The same mic that lost our file?" I asked, my voice dripping with scorn. "The same," he said. "They're not inviting us. They're panicking." He agreed to meet at a neutral public place, a small, glass-walled cafe downtown that had somehow escaped the worst of the storm. He went alone, but I knew he was wired. Anya and I sat in her car a block away, listening to the feed through a secure receiver. We heard the clink of a coffee cup, a new voice, slick and nervous. "Mr. Vittoni, thank you for coming. We admire what you did during the storm, a real service to the community." "Cut the pleasantries. Mr. Graves." Dimitar's voice was a flat, cold line. "Of course. Look, we're all on the same team here. We want a safe, prosperous harbor key." A nervous cough. "We've been reviewing the situation. The GCD, the Gulf Compliance Directorate. They're under a lot of pressure. They're concerned about properties that operated outside their mandatory guidelines, like the briny Finch." There it was, the threat, wrapped in a helpful suggestion. "They feel," Graves continued, "that a temporary suspension of your license might be a good faith gesture. Show the city you take safety seriously. Let things cool down." We heard Dimitar set his own cup down. The sound was deliberate, loud in the silence. "A gesture," Dimitar repeated. His voice was dangerously soft. "Exactly, just to... You're here to offer me a deal. You want me to close my club, stop the noise, and in return, you'll make the GCD's investigation into me disappear." I wouldn't put it so crudely," Graves stammered. "Then let me be crude," Dimitar said. He must have laid something on the table. We heard a small slap of paper. "This is Cade Ramsey. This is his shell company, Pelican Wharf Partners, which imports Citrine Boost. This is Sunset Municipal Services, which use the GCD's letterhead to issue fraudulent eviction notices." I don't know what you... "This," Dimitar's voice was like a hammer, "is the Suncoast Licensing Board, the SLB, run by Serena Voss, which tried to extort an expedite fee from me using the exact same municipal code typo as the fraudulent GCD notice. And this is you, the MIC, the agency that lost my public records request twice." There was a long, terrible silence on the feed. "You've built a map, Mr. Vittoni," Graves whispered. He sounded terrified. "It's a very simple map," Dimitar said. "It shows all the rats in the same trap. So, no, Mr. Graves, I will not be cooling down. In fact, I'm just getting started. I believe we're done here." We heard a chair scrape. Graves panicked. Wait, this is bigger than you think. You're messing with Route 19. You can't just walk in and undo it." Anya and I looked at each other, our eyes wide. He'd said it. He'd confirmed the code. He'd just admitted, on a live recording, that the entire conspiracy was real. Dimitar got back in the car. When he didn't look triumphant, he just looked focused. He's confirmed the link between the agencies. Now track 2. Morgan, it's your turn. Build the public case. I spent the next 48 hours not as a waitress, but as a nurse and an advocate. I went back to every resident of Bayline Court, not just with a clipboard, but with a purpose. I documented everything. Mr. Diaz's fake repair, Mrs. Betancourt's 5-minute structural inspection. The $3,000 relocation fee Sunset Municipal had tried to charge them at the curb. I took photos. I gathered their receipts. I built a mountain of human suffering, quantified in dollars and cents. Then I went to find Jules. He was in the club's kitchen, scrubbing grout. It was the only job he had left. "Jules," I said. He flinched, turning, a scourging pad in his hand. "Morgan, I'm just cleaning." "I need your official statement." "I told you," he said, his voice pleading. "They tried to make me frame you. I don't need that story. I need the real one. I need the story about the Harbor Key Audio Solutions invoice, the one you signed, the one that was triple the price. I need the story about how you got the bottles of Citrine Boost onto the bar, past our inventory. I need the truth. Jules." He collapsed onto a stool, his head in his hands. "He'll destroy me, Ramsey." "He already did," I said, my voice softer. "He used you, and he was going to throw you away. I'm offering you something else." I slid a piece of paper across the steel prep table. It wasn't a threat, it was a job offer. Logistics coordinator for the new Beacon Community Kitchen, a real salary, real benefits, a clean start. He stared at it. "Why?" "Because Mr. Vittoni believes in leverage, and because I said, meeting his eyes, believe that people who are truly sorry deserve to do sorry, not just say it." He signed the full confession. He detailed every order Cade had given him, every dollar he'd been promised. Dimitar took my file the resident testimonies, Jules's confession, my own sworn statement about the booster shot and Cade's threats, and he didn't go to the Miami Herald. He didn't go to the State News. He walked the file 3 blocks to the offices of the Harbor Key Ledger, the small, local paper that everyone's grandparents still read, and he gave a second copy to the pastor at the AME Zion Church, the one who ran the largest food bank in the county. "We don't need a media explosion," he told me. "We need a root fire, something that burns from the ground up." The counter move from Ramsey's network was fast, clumsy, and desperate. A certified letter arrived, delivered by a furious-looking courier. It was from Serena Voss, the SLB. It was an official notice of license revocation for the Briny Finch. The reason, flagrant endangerment of the public by operating as an unauthorized and unsafe shelter during Tropical Storm Helene. I was speechless. They're punishing us for saving my neighbors." Dimitar smiled. It was a thin, sharp, terrifying smile. He didn't call his lawyers. He called Anya. "Anya," he said, "please send Miss Voss our official response." He forwarded her a single file. It was the document I had compiled, a thank you letter to the Briny Finch for providing life-saving sanctuary, signed by every single resident of Bayline Court, including Mrs. Batencourt. He also attached the ledger's small, factual note from the day before, praising our community-first response. Serena Voss had tried to stab us, and Dimitar had just forced her to do it in front of a church congregation. The root fire caught. The Harbor Key Ledger published the story. It was a 3-part series, Above the Fold. The headline was simple, "The Storm Not from the Sky." It was a masterpiece of journalism. It didn't accuse Cade Ramsey of anything. It just laid out the facts. It published a map. Sunset Municipal Services shares a corporate address with Ramsey Holdings. It published the timelines. Bayline Court was declared unsafe by the GCD on the same day the Briny Finch was targeted by the SLB. It printed, side by side, the safety fee invoice from my building and the expedite fee invoice from the club. The city broke. It wasn't just my building. It was dozens of buildings. It wasn't just our club. It was every small business that had been squeezed. The article gave them a name for their pain. The next morning, there weren't 10 protesters. There were 500. They were standing in front of the SLB headquarters. Mrs. Betancourt was there, her fist in the air. Mr. Diaz was there with a bullhorn. They were chanting Serena Voss's name. They were chanting Route 19. The public pressure was immense. The GCD and the MIC, in a joint panicked press release, announced they were launching full internal investigations into potential rogue elements. "They're preparing the sacrifice," Dimitar said, watching the news feed on his laptop. "They're cutting Cade loose. They need a public execution." Serena Voss, trapped, announced a full public access hearing on the matter of the Briny Finch's license. The very hearing she had tried to use as a weapon was now her executioner's block. The date was set, 1 week. I felt a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. We had won. Then my phone buzzed. A new text. An unknown number. A public hearing is a bad place to make a speech. People get hurt. Your apartment is safe. Your neighbors are safe. As long as you are silent. My blood went cold. It wasn't over. I showed the text to Anya. He's still trying to threaten me, even now. She didn't say anything. She just plugged my phone into a diagnostic rig. She typed for 5 minutes. Her face was grim. "It's a burner," she said, "but the signal he's sloppy, he's panicking." "Where?" I asked. "It's triangulated to a single cell tower, the one that services the Harbor Key Marina." She looked at me, her eyes dark. "He sent that threat from inside warehouse 7C. He was still there. He was still moving. The day of the hearing was announced. The city was holding its breath. I was terrified, staring at the threat on my phone. Dimitar came and stood beside me, looking out the window of the club. "He wants you to be silent in a courtroom," Dimitar said quietly, as if to himself. "I won't be," I said, my voice shaking. "I know." He turned to me. "But we're not going to fight him in their building. We're not going to play by Serena's rules." "What are we going to do?" He looked past me, toward the water. "He's at the marina. He's at the scene of the crime, so that's where we'll hold the trial. We're not going to the hearing. Morgan, we're bringing the truth to the dock." The public hearing was a black X on the calendar. A day away. The city was a powder keg, and I was the one holding the match. Terrified to strike, but more terrified to drop it. The night before, I couldn't be inside. I couldn't breathe in my apartment. I found myself on the roof of the briny Finch. The air was different up here, scrubbed clean by the storm, smelling of wet wood and a new, sharp saltiness from the Gulf. I wasn't alone. Dimitar was already there. He hadn't set up a romantic dinner. It was better than that. It was practical. He'd unrolled a heavy canvas tarp onto the damp roof deck so we wouldn't get wet. From a single extension cord, he'd plugged in a string of simple, warm white festival lights, the kind from the taco truck. They cast a small, golden bubble of light in the vast, dark cityscape. The wind was gentle, just a whisper, and from this high, the only sound was the distant, rhythmic hush of the waves. I stood there, my arms wrapped around myself. He didn't speak, just watched me. "I'm scared," I whispered, the admission torn out of me by the wind. "Tomorrow. In that hearing, all those people. Serena Voss. What if my voice shakes? What if I forget? What if they twist it all?" He came and stood next to me, not touching, just a solid presence in the dark. "Your voice will shake," he said. His own voice a low, steady rumble. "And you will be scared. It doesn't matter. You will still be standing there." I want to stand tall," I murmured. "Then I will stand beside you," he said. He turned, and in the soft golden light, his eyes were soft. "Not in front of you, not behind you, beside you." The space between us collapsed. I don't know who moved first. His hands found my waist, and mine found their way to his shoulders. The wool of his jacket was solid under my palms. He was real. This was not the tentative, fever-driven kiss in my apartment. This was different. This was a choice. He leaned in, and his mouth was firm and warm and sure. It was a deep, slow kiss that spoke of trust and shared secrets and the promise he'd made at my door. It was a kiss that said, "You are not alone." I felt his hand move from my waist to my back, spreading flat, his warmth seeping through my thin shirt. I leaned into him, my back pressing against the cool, solid brick of the roof's parapet. I felt anchored. My heart was hammering, a frantic bird against my ribs. I could feel a steady, powerful thump, thump, thump under my hand. His lips moved from my mouth to my jaw, his breath hot against my skin. "We have this," I breathed, my eyes closed. "We have this," he agreed, his voice rough. We talked for an hour, about my future, about how I'd re-enrolled in my nursing program. My tuition covered by a new Briney Finch community scholarship I hadn't known existed, about how my new title, Beverage Safety Manager, would be a permanent day shift position. He talked about learning to let go, how his father's memory had made him grip everything so tightly, how watching me take charge, watching me use my red pen, had taught him that true strength wasn't in controlling things, but in giving the right people the power to win. It was the most honest, vulnerable, and profoundly intimate conversation I'd ever had. It was shattered by the shrill ding of his phone. He pulled it from his pocket, his arm still around my waist. He looked at the screen. I saw his entire body go tense. The softness was gone, replaced by the predator I'd seen at table 9. It was a text from Anya. "What is it?" "Warehouse 7C, he said, his voice flat and cold. "There's movement, a lot of it. The RFID tag on the crate, it's not in the warehouse anymore." "Where is it?" He showed me the screen, a single GPS dot pulsing red. It was no longer on land, it was at the end of Ramsey's private dock. "He's loading the pallets," Dimitar said, his voice a blade. "He's loading the evidence onto a yacht, the Sea Minnow. He's planning to dump it all in the Gulf before the hearing." He looked at me, his eyes now blazing. "This is the moment." We didn't run. We flew. We took the service stairs, our coats flying behind us, our footsteps echoing in the concrete well. My heart was pounding. But it wasn't from fear. It was from sync. We were moving as one. The ground floor was a blur. Anya was waiting by the sedan, her face grim. She had a tactical-looking backpack open. "He's destroying the evidence," I said. "Then we'll be his witnesses." Dimitar replied. Anya handed him a small, dark object. He turned to me. "This is a body cam. Morgan, it streams directly to Anya. I need you to wear it. You are the lead witness. You are the one he threatened." My hands were shaking, but I nodded. I let him clip it to the front of my jacket, his fingers brushing my collarbone. It was cold, heavy, and real. Anya held up a small, sleek drone. "And this is our air support, Morgan. You're good with details. You fly." "Me, I've never—" "It's a joystick. Point and shoot. You'll be fine." "Jules is at the gate," Anya said, already in the driver's seat. "He's driving one of the kitchen supply trucks. He's using the maritime insurance claim to block the main marina entrance. He's buying us time." We tore through the dark, post-storm streets of Harbor Key. The marina was a fortress of shadows and stacks of shipping containers. Jules was there, just as planned, his massive box truck parked sideways across the main gate, arguing with a single, furious security guard. We didn't use the gate. Anya killed the lights and drove the sedan through a gap in the chain-link fence, bumping over the gravel path. We stopped 100 yards away, hidden in the shadow of a massive crane. There it was, the Sea Minnow. It was a sleek, obnoxious, 3-deck monstrosity. Under the harsh dock lights, a small crew of men were using a crane to load the last of the wooden pallets, the ones stenciled Ramsey Logistics, from the dock into the yacht's cargo hold. "Anya, get it in the air," Dimitar ordered. I took the controls. The drone lifted off with a nearly silent whir. I guided it up, over the containers, my heart in my throat. The feed was crystal clear on Anya's tablet. We saw him, Cade Ramsey, and he was on the yacht's upper deck, his back to us, on his cell phone, bathed in the glow of the cabin lights. He was laughing. "Get closer," Dimitar whispered. I nudged the drone forward. The body cam on my chest was recording. The drone's mic was live. "Of course she'll talk." Cade's voice came through the speaker, tinny and arrogant. "She's a little hero. She'll get up there, in front of the whole city, and she'll have nothing. The evidence will be at the bottom of the Gulf. Serena will revoke the club's license. The girls' building will be condemned by morning tomorrow." He laughed. "They'll all shut up, for good." He was admitting to it, all of it. "We have him," I breathed. "Not yet," Dimitar said. One of Ramsey's men on the dock looked up. Maybe a reflection. Maybe the sound. He pointed. "Boss look." He grabbed a long, weighted grappling hook used for mooring and threw it. a desperate high arc at the drone. "Down," Dimitar yelled. I didn't think. I jammed the control stick down. The drone dropped 10 feet, the hook sailing harmlessly over it. I looked at Dimitar. He was staring at me. And in the dark, I saw the flash of that small, proud smile. "Don't touch her," he murmured. "They're spooked," Anya said. "They're casting off." "We're not letting them leave," Dimitar said. He was out of the car. "Morgan, with me. Anya. Keep the feed live. Call the harbor patrol. Now. Use the insurance code." He grabbed my hand. We ran. We weren't sneaking. We were charging, sprinting between the tall, dark stacks of shipping containers. A man, the guard from the gate, jumped out from between two stacks, right in my path. He grabbed my arm, the same arm Jules had grabbed. "Hey, you can't be—" I didn't pull. I didn't panic. I went with it. I found the thumb. I snapped my wrist. The man screamed, a high-pitched, shocked sound, as his grip broke and he stumbled back, clutching his hand. I didn't even look back. I just kept running, right behind Dimitar. We hit the gangplank just as they were about to raise it. We were on the deck. Cade Ramsey spun around, his phone still in his hand. His face went from arrogance to shock, to pure, reptilian hatred. "You!" he spat, his eyes finding me behind Dimitar. "It's over, Cade," Dimitar said. He was perfectly calm. His hands were loose at his sides. He was a black hole of stillness on the chaotic deck. "You're trash!" Ramsey screamed, his composure shattering. "You're a dead man, and she's just a piece of—" "You called her rubbish," Dimitar said, his voice soft, but it cut through the wind. "Tonight, you learn how to sort." A beam of a powerful flashlight cut through the darkness from the end of the dock. "Cade, what in God's name is going on? They're closing the harbor." It was a woman, in a tailored, expensive pantsuit, her hair messed by the wind. Serena Voss. "Serena," I whispered. She wasn't at home, preparing for her hearing. She was here. Anya's voice crackled in the tiny earpiece I hadn't realized I was wearing. "Morgan, she's not just his partner. I just ran her financials. She's a secret shareholder. Ramsey Holdings, 10%. I'm sending the proof to your body cam now." My phone, tethered to the cam, buzzed. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with the stock certificate. "She's not here as the SLB," I said, my voice shaking, but loud. I held up the phone. "She's here as a shareholder. She's here to watch her investment and her evidence disappear." Serena froze, her face a mask of horror, caught in the beam of her own flashlight. Ramsey roared. It was an animal sound. He lunged. He wasn't lunging at Dimitar. He was lunging at me. At the phone. Dimitar moved. He wasn't a brawler. He was a surgeon. He pivoted, intercepting Ramsey's charge. He didn't punch him. He used Ramsey's own momentum, turned, and locked his arm in a clean, brutal joint lock. Ramsey screamed as he was forced, not to the deck, but against the bulkhead, his arm pinned at an agonizing angle. It was over in a second. No blood, just control. I was safe. I hadn't even had to flinch. Then we heard it. Not police sirens, something deeper. The whoop, whoop, whoop of a patrol boat. A spotlight hit the deck, blinding all of us. "Harbor Patrol," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "This is a non-regulatory inspection by authority of your maritime insurance policy. We are boarding to inspect a reported hazardous materials containment failure. Sea minnow. Shut down your engines. You are impounded." The SLB hall was a church of public outrage, and it was filled to the rafters. It wasn't just the press. Though every local news van was parked out front, it was the people. Mrs. Betancourt was in the front row, wearing her Sunday best, her hands folded primly in her lap. Mr. Diaz was 3 seats down, his arms crossed, his face a thundercloud. The room was a sea of residents from Bayline Court, from the other buildings on the GCD's hit list, and small business owners who'd been squeezed by expedite fees for years. The Harbor Key Ledger reporters had their laptops open, their faces grim. The air was thick, hot, and smelled of wet wool and fury. At the front, on a raised dais, Serena Voss sat at the center of a long, polished table. She looked pale but composed, her tailored suit a mask of authority. She gripped her gavel. Beside her, the other board members looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Dimitar and I sat in the front row, reserved for the parties to the matter. He was in a dark, flawless suit, a pillar of stillness in the chaos. I was in my nursing uniform. It was the best, cleanest, most undeniable armor I owned. The mic pin Anya had given me was clipped to my scrub top. My body cam was in my bag, its data already duplicated and secured. Serena Voss banged the gavel. The sound was thin and weak in the cavernous room. "This public hearing is now in session," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone, but brittle. "We are here to address the emergency revocation of the license for the briny Finch, a matter of grave public safety." She put on a pair of glasses, her hands shaking almost imperceptibly. "Our city, in the wake of Tropical Storm Helene, must ensure that our community partners are, in fact, partners, that they do not put profits ahead of public welfare." She was trying to frame us, to set the narrative. She was painting us as the danger. "We will first hear the SLB's case for revocation, and then we will hear the rebuttal from the establishment's owner, Mr. Vittoni." "A point of order, Madam Chairwoman?" Dimitar was on his feet. His voice needed no microphone. It cut through the room, silencing the murmurs. Serena's eyes narrowed. "This is irregular, Mr. Vittoni." "So is this hearing," he said, his voice cold and polite. "I will not be giving a rebuttal. I will be presenting evidence that this hearing is not a matter of public safety, but a coordinated criminal conspiracy. I'd like to call my first witness, our beverage safety manager, Miss Morgan Allen, and to present digital findings compiled by my risk assessment team." Anya Sokol, sitting in the back with her laptop, hit a key. The two massive projection screens on either side of Serena's head, the ones meant for zoning maps, flickered to life. "What is this?" Serena demanded. "You do not have permission to—" "This," Dimitar said, "is footage from last night at the Harbor Key Marina." The room went silent. The video was sharp, taken from a high angle. My drone footage. It showed the deck of the Sea Minnow. It showed the pallets. It showed the close-up Ramsey Logistics, Citrine Boost 34. And then it showed Cade Ramsey, his face arrogant and clear in the cabin light. Anya unmuted the audio. His voice, tinny and full of static, filled the hall. "Of course she'll talk. She's a little hero. The evidence will be at the bottom of the gulf. Serena will revoke the club's license. The girls' building will be condemned by morning. Tomorrow they'll all shut up, for good." The room erupted. A woman in the back screamed, "Mister!" Diaz was on his feet, yelling, "Thief, liar!" Serena Voss was white. She was banging the gavel. Bang, bang, bang. But it was useless. "Order, order. This is inadmissible. This is doctored footage." "Is it?" I said. I was standing now, my voice shaking, but the microphone on the podium picked it up. "Is it Miss Voss? Because I was there. I was the one he was talking about." The body cam footage from my chest flashed onto the screen, the chaotic running view, the man grabbing me breaking his grip, and then the confrontation on the deck. The screen showed K-Toad's face as he lunged and Dimitar intercepting him. And then it showed Serena Voss herself. Her face caught in her own flashlight beam. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. "Serena was there," someone shouted. "She was in on it," yelled another. "Mrs." Betancourt stood up. Her voice was thin, but it carried. You did this to us. You and Cade Ramsey." The chairwoman of the hearing pointed a trembling finger at her. "Ma'am, you are out of order." "No, Mrs." Betancourt cried, tears streaming down her face. "You are. I have my invoice from Sunset Municipal, the $800 safety repair that was just a coat of paint. The potential collapse risk, that was a lie." She held it up, and like a wave, everyone stood up. "Mister." Diaz held up his invoice. A dozen others. "Me too." Here's mine. They robbed us. The Harbor Key Ledger reporter in the front row was typing so fast his keyboard was smoking. A second later, the live feed on his laptop had a new chyron at the bottom. Storm from the sky. Storm from the files. Bayline residents testify to fees for fright scheme. This is a circus, Serena was shouting. This is not about apartment buildings. It is, a new voice. Jules, he was walking up the center aisle, his face pale, his old manager's suit hanging on him. He looked awful, and he looked free. He stood at the podium, next to me. He bowed his head to the room. My name is Jules Pike, and he said, his voice cracking, and I was a part of this. I was pressured by Mr. Ramsey's organization. I signed fraudulent invoices. I was offered a bribe to frame Miss Allen to say she was the one who served that young woman that dangerous drink. The room went dead silent. But she didn't, Jules said, his voice gaining strength. He turned and looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible, bottomless shame. She said no. She refused to serve a guest who was in danger. She refused to back down, even when I grabbed her, when I called her difficult. She was the only one in that room who did her job. She was the only one who was brave. And I am so deeply sorry. Serena Voss had lost all control. This is slander. None of this is proven. It's his word against mine. It's a fabrication. Is this a fabrication, Miss Voss? Dimitar's voice was quiet again. He stepped forward and placed a single, laminated document on the overhead projector. The room looked at the screen. It was a stock certificate. Ramsey Holdings, Incorporated. 10% issued to a private trust, a trust whose sole trustee, as Anya's clean data trail showed, was Serena Voss. The room didn't shout, it just sighed. A deep, collective ooh of understanding. The lie was dead. That's a lie, Serena shrieked, finally losing her composure. It's a fake. It's all a setup. The document is real. Anya's voice came from the back, amplified by the PA system she'd clearly hacked. Just like this is real. A new image hit the screen, an internal SLB email, a directive from Serena Voss's own terminal. It was a budget approval. And the line item was clear: prioritize Route 19. Per external partner request, the digital signature, the metadata, was all hers. A man in a gray suit stood up from the back. It was Mr. Graves, the man from the MIC, the man who had tried to cut a deal with Dimitar. He looked like he was going to be sick. Given this new and deeply disturbing information, Graves stammered, reading from a prepared statement, the Metropolitan Integrity Commission is hereby announcing a full, independent investigation. All licenses granted under the Route 19 designation are temporarily suspended, effective immediately. We will be referring Miss Voss's case to the State Ethics Tribunal for immediate review. Serena Voss looked at him, a look of pure betrayal. He had been her ally, and he had just publicly thrown her to the wolves. As if on cue, the main doors of the hall burst open. 2 Harbor Patrol officers walked in, and between them, Cade Ramsey. He was in the same drenched clothes from last night. His hands were bound in front of him with a thick plastic zip tie. A red welt was on his neck from the cuff. It's a setup, he bellowed, his voice raw. He looked wild. They're framing me, all of them, that rubbish, that waitress. The entire room, all 500 people, just looked at him. No one shouted. A woman in the back just laughed, a short, sharp, barking laugh of contempt. He wasn't a kingpin. He was just a wet, loud, pathetic criminal. The chairman banged his gavel. Mr. Ramsey, you are in contempt. He is in custody, the Harbor Patrol officer corrected him, on charges of reckless endangerment and destruction of evidence. The chairman, his face grim, looked at me. Miss Allen, do you have a final statement? All the noise, all the shouting, all the evidence, it all just faded away. It was just me. At the podium, I looked at Mrs. Betancourt, I looked at Jules, and then I looked at Dimitar. He was standing beside me, not in front, not behind. I leaned into the microphone. My voice didn't shake, not even a little. "My name is Morgan Allen," I said. "I'm a nursing student, and I'm a waitress. A few weeks ago, I was told to serve a drink that was dangerous, and I said no. I was called useless. I was called rubbish. I was told I was nothing. I looked out at the sea of faces. Then, a few days ago, I was told that my home and the homes of my neighbors were worthless, that we were in the way, and that we should be quiet, that our safety required us to be silent. I am here today to say no. I said no to a dangerous drink. I said no to a bully in a fancy suit, and I said yes to my neighbors. I said yes to Mrs. Betancourt. My job, my real job, is public safety, and public safety is not a fee. It is not a route. It is not a deal. It is just people." I took a deep breath. My voice is not for sale, and neither is my city. We are done. I stepped back. For a second, there was total silence. Then Mrs. Betancourt stood up, and she started to clap, slowly, deliberately. Then Mr. Diaz stood, and Jules, and in a wave, the entire room was on its feet, a roar of applause, of whistles, of stamping feet, so loud it shook the windows. People were crying. They were hugging. Serena Voss was gone. She hadn't been dismissed. She had just vanished, slipping out a side door, her phone ringing and ringing on the table, a frantic, unanswered summons. The chairman, his face pale, banged the gavel one last time. "The case for revocation is dismissed, with prejudice. The briny Finches is to be commended for its actions during the storm. This board is now under special, independent review. We are adjourned." In the middle of the noise, in the center of the cheering crowd, Dimitar turned to me. The mask was gone. His eyes, usually so dark and controlled, were soft. They were full of a light I had never seen. He didn't say anything. He just reached out and took my hand. He laced his fingers through mine, a simple, public gesture. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a dramatic embrace. It was just a fact, a statement. We were a unit. We were standing beside each other. The Ledger reporter was already on his phone, yelling at his editor, "You've got the video. You've got the stock certificate. Run it. Run the whole thing." Headline: Cimino seized. SLB shareholder implicated in Ramsey's toxic stockpile. Yes, the real storm just broke. A month. That's how long it took for the air in Harbor Key to feel breathable again. 1 month. The ugly, sun-faded orange placard was gone from the door of Bayline Court. In its place, stretching between the second-floor railings, was a massive, hand-painted banner. It just said, "Thank you, Beacon." The roof wasn't just patched, it was new. The cracks in the walls were properly sealed. The Beacon Community Fund, Dimitar's private, non-profit arm, had stepped in. They hadn't just sued Sunset Municipal, which was now a bankrupt, hollow shell. They'd advanced the full, no-interest cost for the real structural repairs. The fraudulent 40% rent hike was a bad dream. The eviction notices were null and void. Mrs. Betancourt, her eyes bright, was back to watering her geraniums on her balcony. The fallout from our night at the marina and the public hearing had been swift and total. The Suncoast Licensing Board, the SLB, didn't survive the week. The City Council, in a rare unanimous vote, dissolved it in its place. They formed the new Harbor Licensing Council. This time, the charter mandated 2 seats be held by community advocates. Serena Voss wasn't so lucky. The State Ethics Tribunal indicted her on 4 counts of public corruption and bribery. Her Route 19 inches had become a one-way street, and it led straight to a courtroom. And Cade Ramsey, he wasn't a kingpin. He wasn't a boss. He was just a bully with a good lawyer. And a good lawyer can't do much when faced with video evidence, shipping manifests, and a signed confession from his former protege, Jules. Cade took a plea deal, commercial fraud, reckless public endangerment, and witness tampering. He was going to be gone for a long, long time. Ramsey Holdings was carved up and sold for parts. I heard the C-Minnow was sold at a federal auction. The money went directly into a restitution fund for the families and businesses he had extorted. The Briny Finch was, almost overnight, the safest and most popular restaurant in the state. We hadn't just set a new standard, we were the standard. I didn't take the night shift anymore. I worked days. My new title was Director of Beverage Safety and Staff Education. I spent my weeks drafting a curriculum I called Say No, Serve Safe. It wasn't just about not overpouring, it was about de-escalation, identifying predatory behavior, and the legal right to refuse. Half the restaurants on the coast had already adopted it. Jules was there, too. He was quiet, focused. He wore a simple polo, not a manager's suit. He was the new logistics coordinator for the now permanent Beacon Community Kitchen, which operated out of our expanded prep area. He was good at it. He was meticulous. He was, I think, happy. Last week, he'd quietly asked me to look at something by the kitchen door. It was a small, bronze plaque. It announced a new scholarship fund for local nursing students. He had named it after my grandmother. The new, reformed MIC, the clean version, had apparently offered Dimitar a high-paying consultancy role, a position on their new oversight board. He told me about it over coffee. I had acquired a taste for his black coffee. It was the taste of late nights and early mornings, of safety and strategy. I turned them down, he said, staring into his cup. Why you could fix the whole system? They don't need me, he said. They don't need another man in a suit telling them how to run things. What do they need? I asked. He looked up, and his eyes were soft. They need you. I suggested you for the new community oversight seat on the Harbor Licensing Council. I just stared at him. Me, Dimitar. I'm a waitress. I'm a student. Exactly, Maun, he said. You're the one who knows the chart. You're the one who knows what it's like on the ground. They don't need my power. They need your perspective. That night, my apartment felt like a sanctuary. The lock clicked shut with that solid, satisfying thunk he had given me. The storm was a distant memory. The city was quiet. Moonlight, the same milky light that Cade's spy had used to photograph us, streamed in the window. It didn't feel like a violation anymore. It was just our window. Dimitar had come home with me after my shift. We were both tired, not exhausted, not bone-weary like before, but a good, honest, end-of-the-day tired. We stood in the middle of my small living room, the city lights twinkling far below. He reached out, his motion slow, and touched my face. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, the same way he had checked for my fever in the storm. This time, it wasn't a diagnosis. It was a question. You did it, Morgan, he whispered. No, I whispered back, leaning into his touch. We did it. He leaned in. It was slow, so slow. This wasn't the frantic, fever-driven kiss in the dark. It wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss on the rooftop. This was peaceful. This was a kiss that had nowhere to be, no emergency to punctuate. His lips were warm and firm. His hands came to rest on my waist, holding me, not pulling, not demanding, just holding. I wrapped my arms around his neck, my fingers threading into the soft hair at his nape. It was a kiss about trust, about safety, about the absolute, profound relief of being chosen. My heart wasn't hammering against my ribs. It was a steady, powerful beat. A rhythm that was slowly, surely falling into time with his. We stood there for a long time, in the quiet, milky moonlight, just breathing each other in. It was more intense, more real than any explosion of passion. It wasn't fireworks. It was the steady, warm glow of a harbor light. This was sustainable. This was home. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of burning. I stumbled out of my room, my heart jumping. I walked into my small kitchen, and there he was. Dimitar Vitoni, the man who could dismantle a criminal empire, the man who could command a room with a whisper, was standing over my small frying pan, looking utterly, completely baffled. He was trying to make eggs. It's sticking, he said, a look of genuine confusion on his face. He nudged a blackened piece of egg with a spatula. I I started to laugh, a real, bubbling, unrestrained laugh. It was the first time I'd laughed like that, and I couldn't remember. He turned to look at me, and that rare, almost invisible smile touched his lips. He was clumsy. He was human. It was the most endearing, most wonderful thing I had ever seen. "Here," I said, my voice still full of laughter. "Let me." I took the spatula from his hand. Rule 1, the pan has to be hot. Rule 2, butter, lots of butter. We made breakfast together, scrambled eggs and tomatoes, just like my grandmother used to make. It was simple. It was normal. It was a luxury we had fought for, and it tasted like victory. Last week, I re-registered for my final semester of nursing school. My exams were yesterday. I walked into that hall, my stomach in knots, my head spinning with pharmacology and anatomy. When I walked out, 3 hours later, my brain fried, my hand cramping. I looked up. He was there. He was leaning against the far wall of the college hallway, out of everyone's way. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't pacing. He was just waiting. For me. He pushed off the wall when he saw me, his face calm. "You came," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. He gave me that small nod. "I told you I'd be at the door." The Harbor Key Ledger ran one final story about the whole affair. The front page photo wasn't of Kate in handcuffs or Serena in her suit. It was a picture of Mrs. Betancourt on her new, safe balcony. It was a picture of the chefs from the Briny Finch, serving soup. It was a picture of me, in my scrubs, laughing with Mr. Diaz. The headline was simple, "The Hands That Hold the City." The article said there were no superheroes in Harbor Key, just ordinary people who had decided, together, to be stubborn. That night, before the dinner rush, Dimitar gave me a small, flat velvet box. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a simple, thin, silver bangle. It was heavy, smooth, and beautiful. I turned it over in my hands. Engraved on the inside, in small, clean, strong script, were 4 words. "Courage is a habit." The club was full. It was the launch of the new season. Dimitar asked me to say a few words. I stood on the small stage, the one where the jazz trio used to play. I looked out at the crowd. "We're known for serving the best drinks in Harbor Key," I said, my voice clear and steady over the microphone. "And I am very, very proud that we are now also famous for serving the word no." The room was silent for a beat. Then they laughed, and then they stood up, and they clapped. Harbor Key was healing. It was a new season. The tourists were back. The port was busy. The air smelled of salt and new beginnings. There was no more Route 19. Dimitar still kept his permanent reservation for Table 9. He said he liked the view of the room, but he was rarely at it. Most nights, he'd leave his jacket draped over the back of the chair, and he'd just walk with me. He'd stand by the bar while I checked the new inventory. He'd walk the floor by my side, nodding to the regulars. His power wasn't at the head of the table. It was beside me. He didn't call me rubbish. He called me a choice. And since then, we've chosen each other, and this city, every single day. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm so curious. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments, and let's share our thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video. And if you really enjoyed it, hit that hype button to help this story reach more listeners.